Joc Peterson is a very interesting target to follow if you're the Toronto Blue Jays this offseason. He could fill that Brandon Belt DH role quite nicely. Finished last season with an 800 OPS, but had a down year. He's got the power and he's got the left-handed sweet stroke that could definitely help the Jays. So break that down on this episode of Jays Digest, as well as Cody Bellinger. Are the Blue Jays in or out? Reports are indicating that they are losing steam on the star outfielder, so we'll have that and much more coming up next. What's up, Jays fans? I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. Happy New Year to each and every one of you, and thank you so much for tuning in this past year to Jays Digest. I mean, you guys have really made this community something special. Nick and I are super appreciative of everything that you guys do for us on a daily basis, and none of this is possible without the support that you guys give to us day in, day out. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. There's a lot more to come, so stay tuned for what's coming up next with Jay's Digest. But Nick, I mean, this is we're getting into the thick of things here in the offseason. The Toronto Blue Jays, we're waiting for them to make some moves, some significant moves at that, and Joc Peterson is one name that has been floating around pretty heavily now.
Yeah, and reports are starting to surface more and more. The season's getting closer and closer. And a quick reminder, like you said, thank you for your support. That 70% of you guys aren't subscribed, so scroll down and hit that button if you aren't already. And yeah, Happy New Year to everybody who is ready for 2024. And hopefully the Jays can do some big moves on this calendar year. And it got reported a couple days ago on New Year's Eve that according to industry sources, Joc Peterson is drawing serious interest from the Blue Jays. His greatest need at this point is offense. In the DH position usually, as well as the outfield position. Now, Peter, before we get into the Cody Bellinger stuff, it does kind of coincides a little bit. What are your thoughts on Joc Peterson as a player? Do you think it would be a decent fit, or do you think that this maybe wouldn't be as good as a guy like JD Martinez or someone of that nature?
Well, he definitely fits a little bit better because he's a lefty, and the Blue Jays need a little bit more balance. Going for another righty, especially after signing Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, I mean, it might be a bit of a tougher fit, but I think JD Martinez is the better player when we're looking at just pure hitting. But if you look at those baseball savant percentiles, he walks at an incredible rate, does Joc Peterson. He hits the ball for power, and he was hurt last year. He had a bit of a down season, finished with 800, close to an 800 OPS. So I think he's got a little bit more left to give. He's younger than JD Martinez as well, so you could look at it in that respect as a positive. But yeah, definitely someone that I would keep an eye on if I were the Blue Jays. Would he be my main target? Probably not. I would still lean more towards JD Martinez or Jorge Soler or someone of that nature. But he's an interesting player. I think someone that can definitely offer a lot of power and a lot of plate discipline to the Blue Jays. So someone to keep an eye out for sure.
Yeah, now when I heard this first report, I was a little bit surprised, but when you actually look at his stats, like you mentioned, he's actually had some really good seasons, specifically the season before last year in 2022, and he approached a 900 OPS, hitting 23 home runs. He's younger. He's more of a DH at this point. He can play a bit of outfield, but he's more of a DH, and I think he would fit the bill well. JD Martinez, you know you're going to get. JD Martinez is a much better career hitter, and the ceiling's a lot. I would say maybe a little bit lower than Joc Peterson, but the floor is a lot higher regarding what they're going to produce. You kind of know what you're going to get at a JD Martinez, whereas Joc could have a bad year like he did in 2021, could have a great year like 2022, or kind of a middle year like he did obviously last year, hitting 760 OPS. But I like it. We need a left-handed hitter. He would kind of replace the Brandon Belt role, but then the question is, if you're swinging for this kind of acquisition, if you hope that he has the same year that Brandon Belt has last season, we saw how far that took us, and it didn't take us to a playoff win at all. Obviously, we have a couple of other additions, but I think if you're the Blue Jays, you might want to swing a little bit higher, because even if you get a Brandon Belt type production, 800, middling 800 OPS out of Joc Peterson, obviously Belt missed a lot of time, but I feel like I might rather a guy with a higher ceiling that could actually propel this team to another level as opposed to Joc Peterson, where I feel like, I mean, again, he could hit it for a 900 OPS, but I feel like the ceiling there might not be as high as they need for their fourth outfielder spot, especially when compared to Jorge Soler and JD Martinez, where the home runs are just not there, and we've seen the team needs that.
Yeah, I'd argue and with you, Nick, on that point, and I think JD Martinez, his ceiling is much higher than what Joc
Yeah.
Peterson can give. And if you look at their best seasons, if you compare them mean, JD Martinez was arguably the best hitter in the league when he was in his prime, with a OPS nearing 1,100. And Joc Peterson, his best season equates to like an 850, 870, maybe an 880 OPS. So there's a big discrepancy between the two. I think Joc Peterson has a little bit more power potential if he can stay healthy and if he can be in your lineup every day. But JD Martinez, I know he's on the wrong side of 30, and he's getting close to that age where you're not exactly sure if the bat speed is going to be there anymore, but you know what you're getting out of him. I mean, this guy has been a professional hitter for the longest time now, one of the most consistent
Yeah.
run producers that baseball has seen over the past few years, or over the past decade, really. So that's someone that would definitely shore up this lineup. If you want to go with a wild card and maybe someone that is poised to have a huge impact, maybe kind of under the radar, then that's where Joc Peterson comes in. But the way that the Blue Jays have operated this offseason, the acquisitions that they have made, I don't think you could afford yourself to go out and go get another gamble. You need a surefire hitter. You need a sure thing in that lineup, and JD Martinez is as close to that as anyone out there on the market. He's even more sure thing than Jorge Soler would be, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. And ultimately, he'll cost less than JD Martinez, one would assume, even though he is younger. But it's going to be interesting to see. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on that. And let's kind of transition now how that could affect the whole Joc Peterson and Cody Bellinger's future. Peter, it's seeming like the Jays' interest in Cody Bellinger might be dwindling. Obviously, when this comes out from industry sources, usually it means that maybe, again, I don't know. Cody Bellinger's an interesting guy. He was an interesting guy coming into the season, but the moves we've made so far throughout this offseason kind of indicate that it might not be the case. And you see here, the Toronto Blue Jays have been heavily involved in Bellinger. There was a brief period, we made a video on it, where Toronto was considered the favorite, but John Heyman has reported recently, a couple days ago, that the Cubs are now the most likely landing spot for Bellinger, and that the Toronto Blue Jays have lost steam in that race. Saying here, it appears that Bellinger and the Jays have lost steam on that front because Chicago wants him back, and the Jays obviously recently signed Kiermaier and Kiner Falefa, both players that can play the outfield. I'm not expecting Bellinger at this point. I would almost rather a guy like JD Martinez or Jorge Soler, because Bellinger's going to cost a whole lot of money.
Yeah, he would cost a lot of money, and I like the fit for him in Chicago with the Cubs. He was a lot of fun to watch over there. He resurrected his career, and the Cubs want to win. And whether Cody Bellinger is the guy to get them over the top or not, they're still a better team with him. So I think they're going to do whatever they can to keep him, and they're going to spend money. They're not going to be shy in free agency. So I definitely see him going back to Chicago, and I do believe that Toronto's probably out of the mix, maybe for the better, because if you look at this group and if you look at the window that they have in the next 2 seasons here, I don't exactly know if Cody Bellinger would have helped them get over the top, and you probably would have had to give him 5 to 6 to 7 years on a deal, and I don't know if that aligns with the timeline of this group. So maybe the Jays dodged a bullet in that sense. He's still the best hitting free agent out there at this moment, but there's other ways to address the position and get similar production in the short term.
Yeah, you're either going to get the 5-WAR guy with Bellinger, or you're going to get, there's obviously the chance and the worry that you get the guy who hit near 650 OPS for a couple seasons. So, I don't know. I'm happy with the way this offseason is going. I'm not super high on Joc Peterson. I'd rather them get Soler or JD Martinez. I don't really care which one necessarily. Martinez is more of a surefire thing, especially if you want to maximize the 2-year window. Martinez is the best hitter, I guess, aside from Cody Bellinger available. And I don't know. Joc Peterson is an interesting name. Usually when these reports come out, it means they're probably trying to go for him pretty hard, especially when Ben Nicholson-Smith or Shai Davidi report it. But I don't know. We've heard about these guys. We've heard about Isaiah Kiner Falefa before it happened, and that ultimately happened. So it's a little bit worrying, but it's also a little bit reassuring that they're not done. They need one more hitter, and I could get behind Joc Peterson if I try hard enough. So any quick final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah. Yeah, well, like we've mentioned in previous videos here, Nick, you can make all the additions you want if you're the Blue Jays. Unless you were getting Shohei Ohtani or Juan Soto, your team's not going to go very far if you don't get a bounce-back season out of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and a bounce-back season out of Alek Manoah. And probably Alejandro Kirk as well. You could throw him in that mix. Dalton Varsho. You got a lot of guys on your team last year that underperformed, and you still managed to win 89 games and make the playoffs. So that's encouraging in itself. If you're the Toronto Blue Jays, I still think they got a lot of talent on this roster that is getting overlooked by the fan base. And I'm not advocating for Ross Atkins to do nothing. I'm not saying that the front office should just be content with what they have right now, because as it stands, they're not good enough to win a World Series. But if they get better contributions from those players that I just mentioned right now, then they're going to be a much better team than they were last season, with or without those additions. So it's all contingent on them getting what they need out of their star players, and then everything else will fall into place.
Yeah, let us know what your thoughts are on that in the comment section below. And are you happy, or would you be happy, I guess, with a Joc Peterson to the Blue Jays move? But that'll wrap the video. If you want to check out our video from yesterday, click on your screen now, and we'll see you tomorrow.